Hello everyone and welcome to the Daily Signal's Top 10, and today we're counting down the top news stories of the week, many of which have gone either misreported or underreported in the mainstream media. I'm Jenny Maltabano, and here with me to break all of this down is Daily Signal senior contributor Jarrett Stepman. Jarrett, welcome back from Seattle.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
It's Royal Wedding Saturday. I did a great piece with Niall Gardner, who is at the Heritage Foundation. He's an expert on all things British, and he kind of explained the special alliance between the U.S. and the U.K. and why this wedding is so symbolic about that. So I would encourage you to check that out. Also in the news all throughout this week, something very light, Yanny versus Laurel. So I have to ask, Jarrett, what do you hear?
It's definitely Laurel.
See, I'm with Jarrett. I was hearing Laurel too, but what have you all heard? And it's not just us who are weighing in on this. Even President Trump had an opinion.
So clearly Laurel.
It's Laurel.
Definitely Laurel.
It's Laurel. But I could deflect and divert to Yanny if you need me to.
It's clearly Yanny.
Yanny. Definitely Yanny.
Yanny's a winner, Laurel's a loser.
Sarah, it's been reported that you hear Laurel. How do you respond?
Clearly you're getting your information from CNN because that's fake news. All I hear is Yanni.
Oh man, that's Laurel.
Laurel. It's Laurel, America. Definitely hashtag Laurel.
Who's Yanny?
I hear Kofefi.
Okay, I thought that was really well done. Although President Trump said Kofefe, I thought it was Kofifi.
I did too. That's funny that you say that. I thought it was Kofifi too. I guess I've been just hearing it wrong this whole time.
Same. Well, you learn something new every day, but well done on the White House. That was hilarious. All right, next up, the media distorted President Trump's comments about MS-13 this week and just totally piled on. Check this out.
Sir, could you clarify the context of your use of the word animal yesterday in referring to some people who are in this country?
It has nothing to do with this meeting, but I'm referring, and you know I'm referring to the MS-13 gangs that are coming in. And I was talking about the MS-13, and also, and if you look a little bit further on in the tape, you'll see that. So I'm actually surprised you're asking this question because most people got it right. But I'm saying the MS-13, you don't have that where you come from. MS-13, these are animals. They're coming into our country, we're getting them out. They come in again, we're getting them out. We need strong immigration laws. We have the weakest laws in the entire world. We have laws that are laughed at on immigration. So when the MS-13 comes in, when the other gang members come into our country, I refer to them as animals. And guess what? I always will.
So if you go back in President Trump's comments, it's very clear that when he said animals, he was referring to MS-13. They stab people hundreds of times, rip out their hearts, behead them. Seems pretty appropriate. He doubled down, but the media, a lot of them, they haven't retracted what they've said. And our own Kate Trinko wrote a great piece about what the media has done. I encourage you all to go check that out. Does this surprise you?
It doesn't really surprise me. It is disappointing to see the media run with all these headlines that said more or less the same thing, that Donald Trump said some undocumented immigrants were animals. Well, it does matter when you qualify that those some were MS-13 gangsters, essentially terrible people who commit crimes in this country every year. I mean, Frank, if there is a story out of all this, is that this horrible gang exists within our borders in this country, which should be the story. This is why the media, frankly, is not trusted in this country. This is why people think that a lot of these legacy liberal media organizations are actually not being straight with us. I think they only discredit themselves. They've tried to back out of this. They've tried to say, well, you shouldn't call anybody animals. It's really dehumanizing. So that's the kind of spin from this whole thing. And I think this erodes trust in the media. I think, the New York Times started this whole thing about fake news and this got Donald Trump elected. And I'd say, well, yeah, it makes sense. People vote for Donald Trump, or they want to support Donald Trump because they get fake news from organizations like the New York Times.
Yeah, year 2 in his presidency, and we're still dealing with this. Next up, speaking of the Trump presidency, we are officially 1 year into the Mueller investigation for President Trump and Russian collusion. As of now, there still hasn't been any collusion that's been found. Andrew McCarthy was in the building this week. President Trump has tweeted about him several times. Here's what he had to say.
Well, it says that we're quite far removed from the original assumptions of the framing, which would have been that the president, the way that you check excessive or illegal or abusive presidential or executive activity would be by constitutional means, political means, checks by the legislature on the executive, mainly the power of the purse, ultimately the impeachment power. There was never really an intention or even an inkling, I would say, of a federal prosecutor in a constitutional system as designed conducting the kind of investigation we're seeing to rein a president in. In fact,
So I thought that Andrew McCarthy did a great job of breaking this down. The full transcript is on dailysignal.com. You should all check it out and tell us what you think. And something that struck me when I was speaking with him is he said, we've come so far from what the founders intended. I thought he made some truly excellent points. Do you think the American people by now are tired of hearing about this investigation?
I really think they are. Actually, I have to say we brought on to my show, which I co-host with Fred Lucas, called The Right Side of History. We brought on Hans von Spakovsky, who's an expert at the Heritage Foundation, to talk about this position of the special prosecutor and how a lot of times it simply seems to blow up. It becomes this huge, expensive investigation. The prosecutor has almost unlimited powers to do kind of any investigation. They will find something eventually. I mean, they have almost unlimited time, unlimited money, and this is a real problem. This is actually a position that has kind of expanded beyond the limits, which is just what we want to do is find out if there's anything bad going on in the administration. I think the expansive power of this has become dangerous.
Yeah, it is extremely dangerous, and he was saying that this idea of the special counsel is relatively new. You know, the FBI and the DOJ are relatively new institutions if you think about it, so a lot of this is just very interesting to watch how the executive branch has been targeted and what Mueller is doing.
Absolutely. I mean, it is more limited than when it used to be the independent counsel, which had even broader abilities. That position was eliminated in 1999. This position, there are a lot of people on the Hill who would like to expand it and give more powers to these kind of independent prosecutors. And I think we do need to be very cautious about this. How long does this go? How much money is this costing taxpayers when there's really been nothing that's been found for this? That's the smoking gun, this dangerous smoking gun when it comes to Russia. So, you know, I think a lot of people have to consider that when we've gone on a year into this investigation.
The eternal smoking gun. All right, number 7, the media has been attacking Ivanka Trump, and a lot of people feel it's out of line. Watch this.
There is shock and sorrow and rage at that decision by President Trump to move the embassy to Jerusalem. It feels, for the whole region, like a fateful step.
55 people killed yesterday? 58, and you had a split screen of what looked like a VIP tent at the Belmont Stakes. And they don't care. Seemed totally oblivious to what was going on.
So Ivanka travels to Jerusalem with her husband. She is a part of the administration. She's also Jewish. At the same time, typical Hamas is looking for an opportunity, so they're rioting and protesting. Yet a lot of our own media somehow was trying to connect Ivanka's presence as somehow being a reason for Hamas. I thought it was really irresponsible.
It is. I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about with this MS-13 comment. It's the same kind of thing. Here the media is kind of spinning around saying, oh, look, it's the Trumps that are these monstrous, terrible people, when I think regular people see, look, Hamas is this terrible organization that had all this violence that's taking place in the border has been instigated by them. MS-13, obviously a very evil organization. So I think this attention on Ivanka is it's certainly a red herring from what is going on there in the Middle East. And it's amazing that they actually picked her out as a target in this whole thing when the really violence is perpetrated by this terrorist organization, which is Hamas.
That's pretty black and white. And, you know, the media did something very similar with the Olympics in North Korea, and it's very irresponsible to give in to exactly what these groups want, which is basically free propaganda. So keep an eye on that. Hopefully that clears up. All right, number 6, Gina Haspel was confirmed as the first female CIA director this week.
After 9/11, I didn't look to go sit on the Swiss desk. I stepped up. I was not on the sidelines. I was on the front lines in the Cold War, and I was on the front lines in the fight against Al-Qaeda. I'm very proud of the fact that we captured the perpetrator of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. I think we did extraordinary work. To me, the tragedy is that the controversy surrounding the interrogation program, which as I've already indicated to Senator Warner, I fully understand that, but it has cast a shadow over what has been a major contribution to protecting this country.
So Gina Haspel is replacing Mike Pompeo, who's now Secretary of State and has his hands pretty full. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, certainly she finally got through after all this time. I mean, it took a while for Pompeo to get through as well, as we know. A lot of these nominations have been held up in the Senate. This one was a little more controversial. I think CIA itself is always a more controversial position because of their role in the world and because they do have a very fundamental role. I mean, we're talking about, I mean, look, we have issues to deal with Russia and China and North Korea. The role of the head of the CIA is very important. The lower level staffing is handled by her. So it was important that we finally got somebody to head the CIA at this really crucial moment.
Yeah, and they confirmed her boss, John Brennan, last time, so it seemed appropriate that now she's been confirmed herself. All right, number 5, so the First Lady had kidney surgery earlier this week. The president visited 3 days in a row. He also traveled around Walter Reed and took photos with recovering soldiers. And what's kind of interesting about this is they were able to keep this under wraps, and a lot of people have really given the First Lady the privacy and space that she deserves.
Yeah, I think that is a good thing. It's rare that we see this from the media these days that try to run with any scandalous story that they think that they can find. It does kind of remind me of President Grover Cleveland in the 1880s. So the funny thing enough is he had throat cancer that he actually took care of out in a boat, out in the water. Nobody knew about it. It was handled overnight, very complex procedure, and that mostly stayed hidden from the public to protect the president. I think we're seeing a little bit of that with Melania here. It is good that she has her privacy for a health concern. I think that's a good thing.
I think it is. I think she deserves that, and hopefully she gets better soon. And in other news, President Trump is contemplating doing something pretty big with Planned Parenthood. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is very big news. I mean, President Trump is essentially trying to get Title IX funds, moving them away from Planned Parenthood. Now, there's some, I think, a little dishonesty from the left. It's not fully defunding Planned Parenthood, but what it's doing is it says that facilities for reproductive treatments are essentially going to have to be separated from abortion facilities, which I think was an old Reagan rule that they're trying to bring back. It will, I mean, if Planned Parenthood's being honest and most of their business is just reproductive treatments and things like this, well, I mean, then they shouldn't have a problem complying with this. But if it's not, they will, and they will lose money.
You make a great point. All right, number 4, President Trump donated his quarter salary to the VA. Watch this.
As you all know, President Trump is deeply committed to our veterans. These brave men and women have given so much to our country and deserve our absolute best, which is why this president is fighting for reform and accountability at the VA. In keeping with his campaign pledge, the president donates his salary on a quarterly basis to further important projects. Today, the president is proud to donate his 2018 first quarter salary to the Department of Veterans Affairs to support their caregiver program.
So I think this is the epitome of underreported because he's done this his entire presidency to different groups and institutions. It's wonderful to see this time he picked the VA. Why don't you think we see more about this?
Well, I don't think the media wants to run with stories that President Donald Trump is a generous person. I think that's something they definitely don't want. And I was very happy, certainly his first one where he donated to the Antietam battlefield, something that's very important is battlefield restoration in this country. And look, in the future, I hope Trump continues to do this. I think he certainly will. I would suggest maybe recently one of his favorite presidents, Andrew Jackson, his grave was recently vandalized. So if I was to give a suggestion to President Donald Trump, I'd say maybe give something to Andrew Jackson's home there and try to restore his grave, which was vandalized by terrible people, and hopefully provide some security there.
That's a great idea. And the president has visited his grave before.
He most certainly has. So hopefully the president can find himself generous enough to use his next salary to help President Andrew Jackson a little bit.
All right, number 3, this is outrageous. A professor is vowing to boost female grades. Now, he's saying this, he teaches information science, and he's using this as kind of an incentive. And I think this is a terrible idea and kind of was disturbed by it. What did you think?
Well, I just think this whole thing is nuts. To say that you should raise the grades of some people to match others, don't we want good scientists in this country? I mean, don't we want people who know what they're doing? I mean, this is the whole problem. This is the whole lie with these issues like things like affirmative action and whatnot. Is this something that we're going to base something on merit, or are your rewards in life going to come through your gender, your race, your ethnicity? I think our society believes in something called equal rights. Now, I realize this is a classroom and it's not quite necessarily a big thing, but what does it tell to the male students in the class who may have done better, who suddenly got lower grades because of what their gender was? Is that really fair? Is that really just?
If I were this professor, I would, think really hard and come up with more creative ways to entice, more of a diverse group of people, to take my class. That's just me. Number 2, a rapper canceled his meeting with President Trump about prison reform. So this caught my attention. Meek Mill was supposed to go to the White House to meet with President Trump about prison reform, but it's been reported that Jay-Z, who's obviously very famous, called him the night before, strongly encouraged him not to attend. So he didn't. I personally see this as a missed opportunity, because shouldn't we encourage, communication between groups that might not necessarily agree, but how great is it that we can find common ground? I wonder why Jay-Z would try to stop something like that.
Yeah, it perplexes me too. I mean, why wouldn't you want to, for instance, if it's a conservative was asked to go meet with President Barack Obama to have ideas and have a dialogue and conversation, why would that be rejected? And I think this just kind of goes to show that right now, I mean, we are very divided in our society. Unfortunately, a lot of our celebrities are fueling that division, saying that you can't even meet with the president to discuss your ideas. It's not saying that he has to agree with them. He can't even appear with them. And I think that's a really dangerous thing. I mean, I think that's the resistance ideology that we keep seeing from a lot of people, especially on the left right now. But I think this is really problematic when you can't even have a discussion with the president of the United States.
It's problematic and dangerous. So props to Kim Kardashian for reaching out to the White House and Jared Kushner on this issue. It's something that could definitely benefit all Americans. All right, number one, our most underreported story. You were just in Seattle, and you just wrote a great piece on this. Seattle is taxing jobs. Can you break this down for our audience?
This is absolutely crazy. I mean, this really is Seattle trying to tax prosperity. They've created what's called a head tax on any business that makes over $20 million a year. They're going to put a $250 head tax on each individual employed by these companies, which of course creates a disincentive to actually go out and hire people. It's, the very aggressive city council actually approved this with a 9-0 vote. And this kind of goes to the idea that Seattle is becoming aggressive towards wealth. I mean, their whole justification, they say, is to end homeless. They've had an explosion of homelessness in Seattle in the last 10 years while having more revenues, while spending more money. That's not the answer to these problems. The answer is more prosperity, is making housing more affordable by making a more deregulated environment for housing to be built. So Seattle's just been absolutely nuts, and in the last few years it's been great. Even with all this prosperity that's boomed in the tech sector, they still can't get it right. They find just a way to sponge people, and I think it's a terrible thing.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Your story on this was fantastic. It came out this week. You should all go check it out. We'll link to it below. Now, Jared, we want to try something new this week. So our producer, her mom gives her a lot of suggestions for topics, and we're limited to 10, so we don't always get to talk about all of them. So we wanted to ping you about a couple, kind of like rapid fire. First up, there's a volcano that is erupting in Hawaii. What do you make about that?
I mean, pretty scary thing. I mean, I grew up in California, and we have the earthquakes. I think they're pretty scary, but I can't imagine. I've seen some pictures with people golfing with the volcano going off, and I think that's a really scary thing. So I guess good for those people carrying on while all this dramatic thing is happening right there near their homes.
All right, next up, so Mark Meadows is demanding that now is the time to do a vote on Trump's wall.
Well, you know what? Trump promised this wall, and it's something that was part of his campaign, his election. I think the American people who voted for Trump especially want this to happen, and I think it's important that we do this now.
All right, last up, so some schools across the country, they're getting rid of analog clocks because students can't read them. Have we failed our young people, Jared?
We absolutely have failed our young people. I just want to ask the young people watching if they can read this. If they can't read this, then maybe your teacher should teach you how to read an analog clock. I'm just saying.
Good skill to know. All right, thank you all for joining us this week. Good to have you back, Jared. We'll see you all back here next week, same time, same place. Have a wonderful weekend.